good to see all your faces. I'm Sam Gaglani. I'm the EVP of Global Business Development for Xsolla. This is my colleague, Chris.
I'm a senior BD at Xsolla.
Today, we're going to talk about smart payment strategies for amplifying your game revenue. So we've been doing this for a while. I've been in the business for about 10 years at Xsolla. And one of the things we've noticed is when we talk to developers and publishers is sometimes they don't have any sort of strategy in place when it comes to payments. And there's a lot of things to think about when you start to think about payments and how you want to start monetizing your game. Chris, what are some of the things you've come across?
So some of the things that I've come across are actually on the slide. We can talk about them individually, but one of them is a limited payment options. So this is something that users can face. So think of any time that maybe that you've gone to purchase something for a game, or whether it was maybe like a physical good or something else, and your typical payment option wasn't available. That's obviously a big turnoff for users who are looking to try to see something maybe in their local currency or their local payment method.
Yeah, a couple other things that I've noticed is you'll get redirected to an external payment flow. So if you're in a game and you click on something, it actually breaks that the spell of being in the game, and you're getting redirected to a whole new payment interface. So what we try and recommend to developers and publishers is to make sure that if you're going to do that, the branding and the consistency of the payment interface stays consistent with what your game looks like. Something else is a lot of friction in the UI. So sometimes you'll see a payment system asking for name, address, zip code, a telephone number, all of these fields, which creates friction when you're trying to make a payment. And why is that important? Because making a payment, honestly, is an impulse decision, especially when you're in a game. And this is something that should be very quick. It shouldn't take you more than 30 seconds, in my opinion, because either you've got a barking dog, you've got your wife looking over your shoulder, or if you're a woman, you've got your husband looking over your shoulder wondering what you're paying for. So you want to make that payment super fast. Anything else you've noticed?
Yeah, the inability to use a saved payment method. I'm sure that this bugs everybody, but this is something that always bugs me when I go to try to buy something and then I have to enter in my payment method
I hate that.
again. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I just want to be able to do rapid fire payments if I'm playing a game. Like, if I'm playing Dota and I want to be able to just like buy a bunch of battle pass points, I don't want to have to enter in my credit card information every time, because that's going to drop the conversion a lot, and it has a lot to do with the friction as well.
And then the last thing that this is, like, for me, a personal pet peeve is you think you're paying one thing, and then when you actually get to the final page, it's like a totally different number. And you're like, how did that happen? So what we call that is a misleading calculation. So you're being led to believe that on one page it's going to cost this, and at the very end it's usually a 5% markup. And you're like, along the way, where did all that come? So it's really important that when you are working with a payment provider, or if you're doing it yourself, that you are giving the user, what they see is what they get in the end. So that can go, feed into a lot of compliance issues and making sure that you're, treating your customer fairly. So a couple reasons why you should have a payment strategy. First of all, payments, as a lot of you know, or maybe you don't know, is a very confusing and complex landscape. There's digital sales tax in the United States you have to keep in mind. There's VAT in all the different countries around the world. There's all these different compliance measures like PSD2. You got to make sure that if you're processing credit cards, you're PCI compliant, which is very arduous standard that you have to go through with the credit card agencies, and a host of other complex issues. So it's a big task to take on, and if you decide to do it yourself, you have to be ready. And then you have to understand the concept of what's called merchant of record, or MOR. When you're in merchant of record, you're inheriting a lot of risk behind that payment, whether it's sales tax, fraud, chargebacks, stuff like that. So there's a lot to keep in mind when you start to process payments. Chris, I'm taking over, so I'm going to let you talk.
No, that's okay. So, it's a complex thing. So, as Sam just kind of said, there's a lot of things that you need to keep in mind when setting up payments, and being able to offload that to a provider or someone that allows you to focus on making your game. It kind of allows you to do the thing that you do best while taking a very complex issue that has a lot of nuance to it and giving it to somebody else who focuses on that.
Yeah, that's a big one. So, focusing to make the game. You guys are artists. You're making, probably your life's passion. Payments is a whole other part of the business that honestly you shouldn't be experts on. And if you want to be, that's fine. But it really will take away from you making that great masterpiece that you're working on. So what we've noticed in working with a lot of companies is they're willing to offshore that risk or that liability to a vendor, maybe it's Xsolla, to take care of that for them. And so this is really important to think about when you're making your game. Do you want to have that risk on your books? It will save you a couple points when it comes to payouts. Or do you want to have a vendor like an Xsolla or a different company do that for you? And lastly, it's accessing more markets. Chris can talk about this because he just was dealing with it with the partner we were talking to.
So kind of what this refers to, and we're going to kind of talk about this in another slide a little bit more detail as well, but being able to access more markets. So, for instance, if you're looking to sell your game and you're going to go live with, just credit cards and PayPal, that kind of diminishes the amount of territories in the world that you'd be able to go into and actually be able to successfully sell your game. Not everywhere in the world only uses credit card or PayPal. For instance, if you were looking to go into Brazil, there's a large amount of that population that does mobile payments. They do installments. They do, specific local cards like that. If you're looking to get into India, you need to be able to offer something like PayTM, for instance. So if you're not offering those payment methods, you're not really going to be able to access the market. And because your users in the market are not able to make the payment methods that they want, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to market to those users effectively. You're not going to be able to offer them specific sort of bundles or specific payment related or microtransactions that maybe they'd be interested in.
So accepting these payments across multiple platforms is really easy and something you have to have in mind when you're doing this. There's many local options. The big ones are credit cards, PayPal, mobile wallets, mobile carrier billing, bank transfers, peer-to-peer, stuff like that. But keep in mind, each geography, each market has its own really popular payment method. North America, obviously, credit card and PayPal. But when you get to Brazil, it's the wild, wild west down there. It's credit card, but it could also be boleto bancário, boleto flash, mobile, e-wallets, a host of other payment options that are super exotic you've never even heard of. And then when you're traveling into Eastern Europe or parts of Asia, they have their own very customized payment methods that gravitate to user bases that choose to pay for their gaming habits that way versus traditional payment methods like credit card.
Yeah, and these are huge portions of the market too. So for instance, if you are looking to release in China and you're not offering Alipay and WeChat, that's the majority of the population's preferred payment method. Yeah. So some of the pillars that we think are good for a smart payment strategy, the biggest one is convenience. Short, simple, secure, has to be multi-platform, has to be transparent, and most importantly, it needs to be localized. And when we say localized, we mean localized in the language, but also displaying the local currency. So if you're a game in the United States and you're displaying US dollars in Brazil, that conversion is going to be dramatically reduced versus displaying it in Brazilian real, because these users aren't doing that calculation in their head, and it creates a very fast and simple, secure checkout. So then one of the second pillars is basically the security and fraud prevention. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but as Sam had touched on, there's compliance standards that are based regionally throughout the world. So having to adhere to those compliance standards, that way, there's no actual issues with the law of that specific region when it comes to actually handling the payments. Because there's, user data that's coming through, and every single area in the world has some sort of standard when it comes to handling that information. Data encryption, obviously being able to hide that information from yourself, from whatever sort of provider you might be using. And then two-factor payment authentication. This is kind of something that just helps with prevention. You can see an example of it here. But as I had said, this is pretty self-explanatory, because when you are dealing with payments, and there is fraud, that's going to diminish from any sort of money that you might be making. That's also going to dip into potentially something called chargebacks, which is when a card provider will actually go and demand a refund from the actual purchase. And that will actually cause a black mark on the person who's typically merchant of record. So being able to offload that also allows you to not have to worry about anything in regards to chargebacks.
I kind of want to stay on this slide for a second. So I can't emphasize how important understanding fraud and security is if you decide to take this on your own, because having to build this system, monitor it, hire resources to run it, and then not getting in trouble with Visa or MasterCard when it comes to chargebacks is a tantamount experience and takes a lot of time and work and expertise. And so what we've seen are large-scale enterprise customers willing to pay a few extra points on a transaction because they'd rather shift that risk, shift that liability to a third-party vendor, and they don't have to worry about it. And also, when it comes to their shareholders or to stockholders or to private equity companies, they know that they've got an expert in charge of that. So if you're starting off small and you're monetizing your game, it's probably not a big issue. But as you scale and as you grow and as you start to enter different markets where fraud rings are super sophisticated, they will find out a way to get into your game fraudulently and start making payments. And if you don't have the right security measures in place, you're going to get burned, and you'll then probably have to turn to a third-party vendor.
There's actually another part of this that we see come up a lot. It's something called friendly fraud. So essentially that's when, maybe you have a sibling, maybe you have a kid, and they manage to get your card, and then they just buy like $10,000 worth of whatever. And so it's really important to be able to not get dinged from the card providers and be able to have someone that can handle that for you if you're not handling it yourself. To be able to actually refund that money correctly, and so nobody is left high and dry when there's an immense amount of spending on, something that like Roblox or something like that.
Okay, analytics. So all of you know analytics are important, but for payments it's super important because you want to know who they are, where they are, when they're spending it, how much they're spending, what's their LTV. So these are the types of analytics, and there's a bunch more that I'm not including. But these are the type of analytics you need to have either in-house or hire a vendor to take care of it for you, so you can understand the payment matrix and how it's spreading out. Because if you're noticing, hey, I'm seeing a lot of installs in Brazil, but for some reason no one's paying, maybe it's because you're not offering the right payment method. You're only offering credit cards. So your analytics is going to show you that.
Yeah, and you'll also be able to set up an actual successful marketing campaign too. So if you see that there's a ton of users coming through, Western Europe or India, you can start really targeting that audience with, maybe a more emphasis on marketing.
So just in touching on India, so for us at Xsolla, what we noticed was we were seeing a lot of traffic out of India. And so over the last several years, we decided to spin up an entity out down there so that we could access payment methods. It was super important. But without analytics, we never would have noticed that because it was something we knew was important, but we weren't seeing how important it was until we actually dove into the analytics.
And just to clarify, the meaning of having an entity in specific regions, it gives you access to specific regional payments that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Yeah.
So, by having an entity in China, in India specifically, you're able to get the actual preferred methods of payments for those specific countries.
I'm going to let you take this one.
Yeah, so this is just kind of like a summary slide, kind of going back to what is it that a user is looking for in a payment solution, and what is it that a developer might be looking for in an ideal payment solution. And we've kind of touched on a lot of these. Obviously, having a smooth, aesthetically aligned UI, you want it branded to your specific company. You want it, the color palette to align with the game. As Sam had said, if you go to make a payment and it pops you out of the game, if the color palette is different, it's really jarring. Having a simple integration, so no coding involved, it just kind of offloads a lot of the hassle that it comes to actually putting this into a game if you're actually having like an in-game store or something like that. Having multiple payment options that we kind of talked into exhaustion. Secure payment process, again, that has to do with the fraud topics that we covered. Basically when someone's making a payment, they want to feel secure when they're doing it. They don't want to feel like they're doing it through some sort of scammy payment processor. And you as a developer who's using this sort of payment platform want to be able to provide that to your users.
And just to stay here for a second, so these are really important points that we're discussing here, because this is your moment where you're going to capture that user to turn him from a casual player that's playing your game, if it's free to play, to actually paying for something. And you probably have a 10 to 15 second window. And if you're getting this user caught up in a friction, whether it's because he has to add extra data, or it's confusing, or it looks weird to him and he's not quite sure, or she's sure that this is a legitimate place to be, you've probably lost that person for a long time. So I can't emphasize that UI that you're presenting to your user has to be frictionless, beautiful to look at. They feel like they're still in the game, the spell has not been broken, and they feel like, hey, I'm making a payment and I feel safe doing it. It's not I don't feel like I'm going to get scammed here. So these are the things that we've noticed. And then the ability to present that payment method in a PC view or a web view or a mobile view, so that experience is seamless, is super important.
Yeah. I mean, specifically the whole ability to actually offer it in a cross-platform setting. Think of all the times you might have been paying for something on your phone. You have to zoom in, move it around, your thumb hits the wrong field and it screws everything up. So being able to offer that in a more seamless way.
Or registering on the dev comment. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and then localization, Sam mentioned that.
3 minutes, okay.
And then analytics, we touched on that too. And so this is just kind of showing, obviously all the slides with all the screenshots, that's our payment UI. It's been updated immensely in the last, I think, couple months. We went from something called PayStation 3 to PayStation 4. So, this just shows all the different ways that we can offer the payment UI. There's more actually than this. And then, the overview of our payment options, 700 plus across 200 plus geographies. We can localize it. Everything that we've been talking about, we can offer.
So it's an example of when I talked about vendors. Obviously, we are a vendor. So yes, we offer it. Obviously, it's a sponsored talk. We would love for you to use us. We would love for you to compare us against other companies. We've been doing it a long time, and we feel like the solution we provide is really tailored for gaming transaction behavior.
Yeah.
And I think
then
we have something fun to play you.
Yeah, we have a little
because we would be remiss in not telling you about Xsolla. How you do it?
No. Hope the audio on it works though. I don't think it does. Let's see. What's that?
Hit it. There's just no sound.
Yeah.
That's okay. Berkeley? I can narrate it, we're here in Tokyo.
Narrate it, Sam. Do it up.
She's playing League. Hey, let's buy something.
Yeah, we'll act it out.
She's going to buy something. Look how cool that interface is.
Look at how sleek that was.
Her sister's
Low
on talking to her
friction.
friend.
Yeah.
She's drawing on the sidewalk. Crowded city.
See, this just shows all the things you can do in your life when the payment process was easy. You
It's
can go to
fun.
the store.
You
You
can
can
get
draw.
snacks.
You can get snacks.
You can draw.
You can draw in a window. They wouldn't be able to do this if they weren't able to buy that stuff for their game.
And they're displaying the receipt to the cashier.
See? Exactly.
Now we're in India. Can't find the milk.
Forgot to buy the milk again, Sam. See, they're getting street vendor
Pani
food.
Puri, my favorite.
Oh, there's audio. Okay.
Turn it up.
No, it's super quiet.
I hear it. So, I think you get the gist.
Yeah. Again, a good payment a good payment flow and a good payment experience leads to a happier life.
Like playing soccer on a basketball court.
Exactly.
So I guess we could take questions, answers, comments while it plays.
Yeah.
But thanks for your time, and I know it's probably not the most exciting topic here at DevsCon, but it's actually the most important topic, because if you really want to support your game and support your career, you need to make money. And developers, what we found is that's probably the last thing they think about when they're making their game. They're making their game, and then they're like, oh, we need to figure out the payment part of it. So the payment strategy should be, in my opinion, something you should be thinking about very early on. And when I mean strategy, it could be like obviously how you're going to monetize your game, but also what it means to become a payment provider, or when you start choosing that provider, the criteria you're looking for when you're doing that search. So, thank you.
Thanks.
So, okay. Questions? Guillaume? Hello.
Hey.
Yay!
With all the payment methods you're supporting, do you also support in-game stores like
Yep.
Steam?
So repeat the question.
I'm going to repeat the question. So, do we support in-game stores? So it really depends. So Steam is a closed garden, so you're basically tied to the Steam wallet. Epic Games Store, because Tim Sweeney is the coolest guy in the world, and has decided that he's not going to keep a walled garden. He does allow third-party payment options, hence the lawsuit with Apple. Nintendo will allow you to sell Switch keys outside of their store. Sony, Xbox, no way, right now. And then when it comes to Google Play, you know what's going on with the whole lawsuit. So yes, you can do it. You just have to spin up an external web store outside of the marketplace.
Yeah, so it's entirely platform dependent. If if you're on PC and you have maybe like a DRM free version of the game or something, like it has its own launcher, then absolutely, that's very straightforward. But as Sam said, it's completely platform dependent. Yeah.
Cool.